Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. This video will be a little bit different as we've already rewatched and ranked the entire Hannibal series. This video is just going to contain some bonus ranking lists, a reminder of where the seasons fell, a massive every single episode in the series against each other list, both mostly objective and personal, and then a significant to me at least character ranking as to who were my favorites and who were not, and then a ranking of the various killers that happen to appear within the show based on, again, my personal opinion of them. So starting, just a reminder of where our seasons fell. On our mostly objective and personal ranking, they did fall in the same order, and season 2 was the best season. Season 1 second, and then season 3 came in third. And this is the complete episode rankings. So because the mostly objective ranking, each episode is ranked in episode order when it shares the same score, they will be in somewhat of a season order. The personal list, however, will be more mixed up, but all 39 episodes were ranked against each other, and this is the full, complete episode ranking list. So we will start with 1. Apéritif, souffle, sorbet, fromage, relevés, savaro, kaiseki, mukozuke, shizakana, nakachoco, konomono, tomewan, mizumono, dulce digestivo, the Great Red Dragon, 17th, the Wrath of the Lamb, roti, primavera, aperitivo, and the Woman Clothed in Sun. The number of the beast is 666, amuse-bouche, potage, futamono, yakimono, suzakana, buffet Freud, Hassan, antipasto, contorno, and the Woman Clothed with Sun. And then in 33rd, entree, tronormand, sakazuke, takiwase, secondo, coqueles, and then in 39th place, worst episode of the series, and the Beast from the Sea. Now, my personal ranking is a bit more mixed up, but this again is all 39 episodes in order from what I consider to be the best episode all the way down to what I would consider to be the worst episode of the series. So again, we'll start with first, Digestivo, Tomewan, The Wrath of the Lamb, Mizumono, Mukozuke, Saburo, Yakimono, Shizakane, Dulce, Kaiseki, Hassan, Konomono, Fromage, Futamono, Contorno, Relevés, 17th Buffet Freud, Suzakana, Sakazuke, Entree, Amuse-Bouche, Nakachoco, Takawase, Sorbet, Aperitif, the number of the beast is 666, and the Beast from the Sea, the Great Red Dragon, Roti, and the Woman Clothed in Sun, Aperitivo, Tronemond. Then in 33 we have Primavera, Souffle, Coqueles, Secondo, and the Woman Clothed with the Sun, Antipasto, and then my least favorite episode of the series ends up being Potage. We next have the character rankings, and just a bit of a disclaimer is that not every single character in the series is included in this list. This is just the list of characters that I either remembered, cared about, greatly liked, greatly disliked, or had some sort of impression of. There are other characters who were in there, maybe even multiple episodes, who just never left an impression or never gained any sort of opinion from me, in which case I left them off the list. So it is not a comprehensive list, but for most of the main players, I have created a personal ranking of characters that I just liked best, and that's 19 of them. So the first ranking was difficult for me because Hannibal Lecter and Will Graham are both really good characters. The reason I decided to put Hannibal Lecter up top is that obviously the series is called Hannibal. It would not exist without Hannibal, and most of the amazing imagery at least as far as the murder scenes tended to come from Hannibal. Some of the other killers did okay too, but Hannibal really sold it. And of course, Hannibal is the one we know in the end won and at least is alive, as Will Graham's fate is kind of left open-ended. Another reason I put Will in second to Hannibal is, of course, the fact that he was very wishy-washy. He'd go so far down the path of a killer before like getting cold feet and like running back, and kept changing his mind, going back and forth. And yes, that created a lot of the drama for the series, but also I prefer a character that commits, and Will just didn't do that, but he's still second best. My third favorite, of course, is Bedelia du Maurier. I just love the entire vibe of the character, the way she speaks, the way she dresses, the way she handled the situations that she was in with like calmness and a certain level of class, even coming up with an alibi. I just really like that character. Similar reason, Mason Verger is in fourth place because he was an entertaining character, and a lot of the funny scenes in season 2, which is one of my favorites, like for the fact that he ate his own nose in his face, and all the things with the pigs, and like the weird tears with the martini glasses. I just thought it was a really well done character, so I put him in fourth. Beverly is in fifth, simply because she's one of the only ones who stood by Will when everybody else was kind of sure that he was guilty. Even though she also thought he was guilty, she at least was willing to continue to look, and that ultimately did lead to her dying. So her loyalty ended up costing her her life, so I think that she does deserve to be pretty high up on the list. Sixth, I put Alana Bloom, and that's because Alana is a consistent character throughout the series, but I'll admit that sometimes I liked the character, sometimes I wasn't overly fond of the character. I think my favorite version of the character is the one from season 3, after she's gone through her hardships and she kind of gets a little bit more steel in her spine. Like in the first season, she was she wanted to be Will's friend, but then ultimately ended up not believing in him. And then she kept wanting him to be called insane during the trials. And then, of course, at the very end, she ended up in an affair with Hannibal, only to find out Will was right all along. And then Abigail pushes her out a window, basically on Hannibal's orders, and she ends up with a death sentence from Hannibal. And she does go from being with Hannibal to being with a woman. And so, you know, Elena, she's not a bad character. She has a lot of growth and variation throughout the series. However, I don't like every iteration of hers, but I do really like the last one that we saw. Jack Crawford, not a bad character either. That's why I put him in seventh, but also not my favorite. I don't like the way that he handles Will a lot of the time, and Will's specific needs as far as like, he puts him in the field and then he promises that he's not going to let him go too deep, but then Will goes way deep, ends up with like an entire brain encephalitis. I don't think that's a disease. Well, it could be a disease. Anyways, he has a brain sickness. He doesn't notice, and he keeps pushing and pushing and pushing, and then, he expects loyalty from Will, even though he hasn't really done anything to earn it, and he's one of the main characters. He's in pretty much every episode, but there were many times where I'm like, does he need to be? I mean, he has his role as the FBI. That's Will's in. That's how Will and Hannibal meet. But did he have to be as large of a character as he was? I'm not really certain. Obviously, in eighth, we have Frederick Chilton, and of course, Frederick is also a fun character. He goes from having a huge ego, and he keeps ending up the victims of killers, but managing to survive every time, and that is why I put him into eighth. I mean, it starts with Abel Gideon, who does a impromptu surgery on his abdomen. Then we, of course, ended up with Miriam Lass being hypnotized into believing him to be the one who kidnapped her and ends up shooting his face. Then Francis Dollarhide bites his lips off and burns him alive, and he's still kicking. And to be able to survive all of that is truly impressive. So he deserves the eighth spot. Jimmy Price and Brian Zeller obviously were also very difficult to separate because pretty much every scene they're in, they are in together. However, in season 1, there was a scene where Brian had fed information to Freddie. Lowndes, which I felt was distasteful, and that is why Jimmy went first and Brian came in second, 9 and 10 respectively. 11th is Abel Gideon. I feel like Abel's a very memorable character, but he's also kind of pitiful. But really, the main reason I put him so high up is that, again, some of the funny scenes as far as making fun of like the darker side of the show, the dark humor side of the show, had like Abel for several scenes at one point eating himself and making kind of snarky comments about the fact that he's eating himself. Or you could also call them witty. And again, dark humor aspect of it, and so that's why he's an 11. Freddie Lowndes is at 12 because she's significant but dislikable. And this is now getting into the part of the list where I don't really like the characters. Margot Verger, I wouldn't really think much of her other than the fact that she did trick Will into getting her pregnant, which I felt again was distasteful, but then she does come through at the end. She gets her revenge against her brother, which I think is great. She ends up in a relationship with Alana. They have a baby. So I think she comes out top in the end. I don't dislike her. I don't really like her either. She's kind of semi-neutral, but I do veer towards dislike only because of the Will situation with the baby between her and Will. Um, 14th, Miriam Lass. Significant character, but didn't leave much of an impression either. Molly Graham came in the last episode, or the last season, I should say, and again, she didn't leave much of an impression, but I also was of the opinion that she didn't necessarily have to exist. Not to say like that she's a bad character, just that, you know, they brought in a family for Will and then like immediately he leaves the family, like they're in there for like an episode and then, then they get attacked, so maybe a couple episodes we see the family. And it's like, did you have to go through that process? Couldn't he have just been off on his own in a cabin with his dogs? Like, did he have to get married? Especially when they're both damaged, and Will especially is damaged. Did he have to put a woman through that? So I didn't really necessarily think she needed to exist. Bella Crawford, she was in a few episodes, and I think she was significant to Jack, and I do think that she made a mark on the series. But again, she didn't leave too big of an impression. She left enough of an impression that I remember she exists, but I don't really have any positive or negative feelings towards her. 17th, we have Francis Dollarhide, and of course, I did mention throughout the last season that I understand why he's significant plot-wise, but I just didn't really connect with the character. In fact, I actively disliked the character. Obviously, the first impressions we got of the character was him like acting weird and contorting and obviously being in a bit of a state, and that left a bad impression. And then, then he starts the relationship with Reba McLean, who is an 18th, who was blind, but again, because I didn't connect with either of these characters and I didn't particularly like either of these characters, I couldn't put them very high up at all. And that brings us to my least favorite character of the series, which of course is Abigail Hobbs. And I think Abigail, if she was just in the first episode or even like the second, where we saw her almost be killed by her father in the first episode, then the second episode we check up on her, she's fine. I think that would have been fine, but they dragged her out season over season over season, and I was just like, I don't understand why she's significant. I don't understand why we should care about her. I know they're doing like this whole parental proxy thing, but I'm like, did they really need to do that? I'm sure Hannibal and Will eventually would have found some other way to connect without Abigail being involved. And in fact, Abigail kind of ruined Hannibal and Will's relationship because, when Hannibal faked her death and framed Will for it, Will thought she was dead. This turned Will against Hannibal, and had she not been around, Will then wouldn't have felt like he lost something at Hannibal's hands, and so when Hannibal offered to run away together, he might have run away together, and then we would have missed out on a lot of the series, but it probably would have had a better ending, and I just never felt that there was anything compelling about the character, enough so that you had to drag it on for so long. I genuinely did not ever see a purpose to Abigail as a character, as a recurring character, I should say. So dislike her greatly, and that is why she is in 19th place. And now we come to the final bonus ranking for the episode, which of course is the killer rankings. And obviously, Hannibal once again had to be the top of the list because Hannibal is an epic killer and he's very artistic with the scenes that he leaves behind. Then we had Eldon Stamets, who of course was the mushroom killer. And not only is he in second place because I like mushrooms, but also because I feel that his way of killing was almost particularly cruel in that he didn't kill his victims outright. He put them into comas, then left them in the ground to literally rot alive until eventually they ended up dying, and that is extremely cruel. On a similar note, Catherine Pym's very greatly disturbs me also. She is the one who gave elderly patients lobotomies, took out their eyes and like their tongues, and then set them free in a park so that the bees could create hives inside of their skulls. And again, very disturbing. Tobias Budge, we recall he's number 4, and that of course was the one who decided to turn a person into a cello and treat their vocal cords the same way he does catgut strings. And also the one who killed Franklin, who wasn't on my character list just because he didn't leave a huge impression and was in the show for like only a couple episodes. But the couple episodes he was in, he was very pitiable, so. But Tobias was more interested in Hannibal anyways. Then, of course, 5th, I put Francis Dollarhide in 5th only because he is so significant to the end of the series and is the person that Will and Hannibal finally come together to kill together. And he does leave behind the families, and I think also he's credited with, in the very first scene of episode 1, Will is talking about Mr. and Mrs. Marlowe and how they had died. And I believe Francis is the one who actually ended up killing them. Like, that was one of his earlier victims, um, which ties him back all the way to, like, the start of the series. And while I didn't like him himself, or really like the whole concept of, his weirdness and thinking he's a dragon, he was pretty significant, and they did spend a lot of time on him, so I do rank him high for that reason. The next one is Matthew Brown in 6th, and he is a killer because he did kill, I think it was the bailiff during in season 2 during Will's trial. Um, he basically did a Hannibal's greatest hits, thinking it was Will's greatest hits murder, using elements from multiple of the crime scenes that Will had been accused of being the creator of, even though we all know it was Hannibal. But then he tried to kill Hannibal on Will's behalf, and he failed miserably, and that was the end of his career as a killer. So he only killed one person, but I did like how it was kind of a greatest hits, and I also like that he was brave enough to try to kill the cannibal Hannibal. 7th was Abel Gideon, and similarly, he's lower down because he is implied to have rage killed, and that is what got him into the mental institution. However, Frederick then twisted his brain into thinking he was Hannibal, so he again ends up like kind of a mimic, where he kills the nurse, mimicking Hannibal. And then he does, of course, the surgery on Chilton, but he doesn't kill Chilton, so that doesn't really count as a murder. And then he ends up eaten, so ultimately I feel a bit sorry for him. Georgia Madchen is an 8, and I do feel sorry for her too, because she only killed because she had a disease, and then when they found out about the disease, she was starting to get better, and then boom, up in flames. So, sad end. And she didn't really mean to kill, but I did kind of like the vibe of like when she was in her situation. It sucks that she killed her best friend, but I do also think that it was an interesting concept overall for the killing. Ninth was James Gray, and of course that was the guy who made the eye, and he got sewn into the eyeball using a palette of humans. And he's in the middle there because I don't really have a positive or negative impression. I did like the imagery of the eye looking up from the silo, but I mean, we saw him for like a few seconds on screen before he got like sewed into his own art piece. Randall Tier attacked Will, ended up dying. He was the one who wanted to be an animal and created a hydraulic sort of system with the fossil skulls in order to tear people apart like a beast. I have him pretty low down because I didn't really like the concept too much, especially because he was using a machine to do it. And yet then they were like talking about how it made him feel like he was finally in the skin he should have because he was wearing this suit. But it's like the chomp force, the ripping apart, all of that was done with bones and machines. He didn't actually, like, I mean, that was a murder weapon to be fair, but it just wasn't my favorite. 11th is Mason's Goons, and that's Cordell, Tommaso, Matteo, Carlo at various points. And well, they're killing on orders, they're goons, they don't really have their own thing going on, so 11th place seemed fair. 12th was Garrett Jacob Hobbs, and that's only because, you know, he didn't really bring about any of the imagery that was interesting. You know, the only victim of his directly that we actually saw was the one he tucked into bed. Obviously, the one in the field was Hannibal, and then the one on the antlers was also Hannibal. So Garrett Jacob Hobbs really just was kind of an off-screen killer, then tucked somebody into bed that he had killed because he felt remorse about it because she had cancer, and then Will kills him. It's Will's first kill, so then he hallucinates him over and over and over, and he just gets dragged out. Similar to Abigail, I get that it's a significant, it was his first kill, for Will at least, and then he starts hallucinating him. But I just feel like they could have done that in like a couple episodes and then resolved it. Like, I didn't think it had to drag on as long as it did. And that just soured my entire impression. Then in 13th, we have Clark Ingram. And he, of course, was again an off screen serial killer. But he did kill the one woman who then was sewn into the horse's womb. Um, and then he was really, really cruel to the really, really sweet animal guy. And I thought that was horrible. So I put him way down at 13. And then in last place, as far as killers are concerned, is Lawrence Wells. And he, of course, was the one who did the totem pole. And okay, actually, he's not the last place. I realize I forgot the angel maker and I can't even remember what his name was. But he would be in 15th place because I genuinely don't remember him, though he did turn himself into an angel in the end. Lawrence Wells was the one who made the totem pole and then killed his own son thinking it was his rival's son in revenge against the girl who dumped him, which was sad but also not very memorable. Um, and that is our list of 15 for the killers. And that is all of the bonus rankings for this series that I have. Hope you enjoyed the bonus episode, and again, I will see you in the next series.